Okay, well, welcome to the weekly Impact Sales Tribe VIP call. Today, we're going to be jumping into a topic that's near and dear to my heart because I've done this and gone over this so many times with people in so many different situations. It's what I would classify as one of the things in the oldie but goodie category. And maybe I date myself when I say stuff like that, just using that phrase, but it's just an area of concern or focus that I think sometimes catches people. And when I'm working with people individually, when I'm talking to teams, when I'm going over certain elements of their business, primarily their prospecting, their lead generation efforts, things like that, this particular issue comes up quite often. And it's amazing to me how most people recognize these things and understand these things, but when it comes to deploying them and staying consistent with them and not getting caught by them in the course of normally doing business, most people do. They find themselves catching themselves and realizing, oh, I'm not doing this when I really should be doing this other thing. So we're going to dive right into that, talk a little bit about what that is today. And that's going to be for the first part of this call. And then we're going to open it up for some Q&A as we normally do, so to make sure that there's any topics or things that you guys want to go over, that we make sure that we get them addressed. So here's what I'd like to talk about today. And this is one of these things that, you know, it is straightforward and it makes common sense, but as human beings, we all fall victim to getting trapped by this. And the concept that I want to highlight is this: there are certain high value activities that make you money in sales, and there are a lot of other activities. Okay. So there's high value activities, and then there's low value activities to generate your sales success. Now, today we're going to spend just a couple of minutes talking about high value versus low value, right? We're going to make sure we understand with clarity about that. And we're going to also talk about how we minimize these things impacting us in a negative way. So let's dial into this in a couple of different ways. The first thing we have to do, if we're going to break this down, and I think this is really, really important that you do this, is that you have to clearly identify with crystal clear clarity what high value activities are. And you need to stay focused on those things and be reminded of those things. And you need to understand what lower value activities are. And more importantly than identifying both of them, it's understanding when and how to do both. And this is where people kind of get themselves in trouble. They make decisions that end up not being the most productive decisions. So we're going to dive right into this. So high value and low value activities. Well, at the top of the list, as far as high value activities, and this is what I want you to understand and be completely clear on this, there are truly only two high value activities in your sales effort. There's just two things that are considered high value activities that are at the top of the list, but really should make up the majority of your effort at all times. Okay. And this is so important for you to get, because a lot of times people miss this right out of the gate and they prioritize a lot of the wrong things. And as a result, they find themselves struggling. So let's break down what those two high value activities are. Okay. Really straightforward, really simple. I know if you've gone through ISM, you already know what they are, but we're going to dig a little deeper today. We're going to dig deeper into the why and the how, and we're really going to get some clarity around why this is so important to your sales success. So the two high value activities at the top of the list of the things that you are doing in your sales effort are just two things: prospecting and selling. You are either spending your time trying to get in front of somebody to be able to sell them, or you are in front of them or connecting to them or on a call with them trying to sell them. That's it. Those are the two high value activities. There isn't any other thing that falls under high value activity. Now, I know a lot of people would disagree with that. They say, well, you have to do this and you have to do that. And I would agree. A lot of things are valuable, but are they high value? And the fact is, in a selling environment, especially one that you want to be highly productive and efficient, they usually aren't. And let's just talk about both of these real quick, and then we'll dive into the lower value ones real quick so you understand the difference. So by way of prospecting, obviously, that's pretty straightforward. Whatever efforts you're putting out there to generate interaction with people, phone calls, emails, text messages, social media marketing, whatever it is that you're doing, your prospecting effort is a high value activity. And to underline that, I would say that your personal involvement and engagement in the process, meaning you're actively communicating, trying to make things happen, is the highest value of all of those. You can set things in motion. You can set automations to do certain things to generate interest, make connections, things like that. But the highest, most valuable use of your time is engaging people. And that starts with prospecting. It puts it at the top of the list. It's the highest value activity. The next, obviously, high value activity is actually selling them. So that's any of your time that you spend directly interacting with somebody, trying to sell them. And that really is that in between stage from the point that you've identified them as somebody you want to work with, all the way up to the point that you make them a client. All of that time spent is high value activity. Now, years ago, and I date myself when I say this, but years ago, we used to use the phrase that windshield time kills your productivity, meaning when you're in the car driving to get from one place to the next, it kills your productivity. And that was absolutely right, because in the early days, and I'm really dating myself now, in the early days when cell phones were just coming out, you really didn't have a whole lot of things that you could do in the car, right? Not everybody had a cell phone. You couldn't really reach out and make calls in the car, and that time was dead time. So we really drilled down on that in that environment, but it's just as important today. And the reason is because I believe there are more distractions today than ever before. There are more things that suck up our time and take our energy and focus away. So prospecting and selling, top of the list, high value activities, the only two high value activities. Now, what are the low value activities? Well, let's talk about what those are. Those are things like putting together proposals, okay, doing research and preparing to figure out if somebody is the right fit or prospect for you to pursue. Any administrative work, okay, anything that is not prospecting or selling is a low value activity. Now, I know for some people, this kind of rubs them the wrong way because they want to look at everything that they're doing as an integral part of the process. And that's true. It is. All those things have to happen. They are important. But the most important things that you can be doing to ensure your sales success are prospecting and selling, high value activities. And anything else that you spend will take you farther away from your goal than move you closer to it. And the reason why is, as I said a couple of minutes ago, we are more distracted now than ever before, okay? There are countless things in our calendar. There's webinars, there's meetings. We're getting bombarded with messaging. We get a ton of distractions as it is. It's very easy to go down that rabbit hole and get lost in your schedule doing things that are non-productive, doing things that aren't making you money, that aren't moving your sales effort forward. And this happens to a lot of people. And this is a problem that I've solved with people more times than I can even count, because they get caught up in other things that take them away from high value activities. And we'll go through the process of, we'll break it down and say, okay, let's look at Monday. How much time did you spend prospecting? How much time were you on appointments? Were you actually with a client or a prospect? And then you look at the total day and you add up the time and you go, wow, you really only spent a couple of hours prospecting and selling. What were you doing with the rest of your time? How much time was spent doing those other things? Probably way too much time. Now, that's not the whole story, because part of what you need to understand is, how do you fix it? And how do you really get your sales production going and moving in the right direction? And I'm going to tell you one of the secrets right now. And that is effective utilization of prospecting and selling in prime time. Now, what is prime time? Well, prime time is the time of the day or weekend or whenever you do it, the time of the day that is the most productive for the work that you do and gives you the highest likelihood for success or interaction with your prospect. Now, some people prospect off hours, and that's usually cold prospecting where they're sending out messaging, and that's fine. That's good. But when you're trying to engage people, that prospecting time, you want it to be prime time, a time when they're more likely to be responsive to you. Just like your selling is prime time, the time that you're going to interact with them. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell anybody how to run their calendar, but I will tell you that it doesn't matter what industry you're in, there is prime time and there is not prime time. And I've seen people fail simply because they were doing the right things at the wrong time. They were prospecting, but they weren't prospecting in prime time. They weren't getting a lot of interaction, or they weren't blocking off enough time in their calendar for quality appointments. It created these challenges in their schedule. And as a result, they struggled. So I'm going to give you a tip. I'm going to share this with you as a best practice. I think it absolutely will help. I hope you embrace it. If you don't, I will tell you, it will be a little bit harder for you because of the amount of distractions that you have and the amount of things that take you away from productive activity, because there's a ton of them. You can't help but open social media or your email or calendar and be distracted and pulled in a lot of different directions. And that's not even counting surprises that pop up, things that happen. A client's upset. You have an issue with a vendor or provider, whatever it may be. Those things happen too. What I'm going to tell you is that you really want to try to focus getting your, what we call high value activities, into your prime time schedule. Make sure you're dedicating enough time to both during their prime time. Now, that may mean that you adjust your schedule a little bit. That may mean that you realize that, look, I can't reach people before 8 a.m. and after 5 p.m. in my business. So I'm going to put all my prospecting and selling inside of 8 to 5, and I'm going to do my proposals, my administrative stuff, my research off hours. Now, I'm not trying to tell anybody that they got to work, 12, 15 hours a day. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying, though, is if you really want to be productive, focus your time and energy on putting those prime time activities in the right schedule slot for the most efficiency, for you to be the most effective. Put them in slots that are going to get you the higher result. And that really is an important consideration when you factor in the days that we typically see. I talk to a lot of people. I talk to a lot of coaches, consultants, entrepreneurs, and I'll ask them many times, tell me about your work week. What does that look like? What are you doing on Monday? What are you doing on Tuesday? What are you doing on Wednesday? And I go through that process with them, because when we look up the average amount of time spent on prospecting and selling on average, and I go, you guys might be the exception. All right. You probably are. You're already trained. You're productive. You're doing a lot of things. But on average, the average amount of time spent prospecting and selling for the average sales professional, okay, whether they're a coach, consultant, or entrepreneur, is probably somewhere between 3 to 4 hours a day. Now, that may be a lot more than what people actually do. That might be less than what other people do. But I will tell you, that's about the average, about half of a working day. Now, what makes up the other half? It's all the things that I just described, all the things that can literally distract you from being productive, that can hold you back from being successful, the things that suck your time and energy and focus. It's really, really important that you understand that prospecting and selling make up the majority of the time that you should be focusing on as high value activities. I would much rather be in a situation where I'm prospecting and selling during prime time, increasing my odds for success, making my engagements more productive, not missing people, not dragging things out, than trying to juggle every little thing that pops up during the day as it comes in. And this is a time management thing, but it's also something, it's in ISM in the training, but it's something that I think you all already know, and you really should. If you don't schedule it and block off time, you'll find that time will disappear on you. You either manage time or it manages you. So I would encourage you to make sure that in your prime time business day, your prime time hours, whatever that is for your business, that you block off time and dedicate it towards prospecting and selling. And don't allow the other things to creep into that time period. Don't allow those things to suck up your time and take your productive time away from your day. just don't do it. Don't allow it to happen. Make sure that you dedicate that time. And the reason why that's so important, when I look at salespeople, entrepreneurs, coaches, consultants that are struggling with sales, most of the time it's because of three areas. One being a repeatable client acquisition system. You guys know that. That's such a critical piece. The second is an effective and easy to follow sales process. They get kind of disjointed. But before those two things even happen, I've seen people struggle and fail because they didn't have control of their schedule. They didn't have control of when they were doing their prospecting. And as a result, they weren't getting the results that they should have been getting. They were sending messages out at the wrong time. They weren't dedicating time in their calendar consistently for prospecting. And inevitably, they figured out other things to do with their time. As a result, it put them in a really, really tough spot, and they struggled. They didn't generate the results that you need to generate. When I work with people, especially people that are struggling to make sales, one of the very big tips that I give them, a piece of advice and direction, is get rid of all the other extraneous stuff. Push it off to another time, after hours, do it later, push it off to the weekend, whatever it is, to get control of your prime time. Like, your prime time needs to be for selling and prospecting, and that's it. And I would encourage you that if you really want to understand how effective you are in that, take a look at your last couple of weeks in your calendar and be honest with yourself and look at what you did time-wise, from when to when, who you spoke to, what you did during the hours that you didn't have a scheduled appointment. And you will find that that average is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of that 3 to 4 hours a day of true prospecting and selling. Now, I know that for some people is a lot less than what they do. For some people, they might have 6 appointments in a day, and the average appointment is 30 to 45 minutes, maybe longer, and they're just definitely doing more than that. And that's great if that's you. But I will challenge you, and I'll tell you that when you're struggling, if you're struggling to fill your pipeline, if you're struggling to generate sales, I bet you a piece of that struggle is because you're not prospecting and selling in prime time. You're not committing to it as a high value activity, and you're allowing these other activities, these lower value activities, to take up too much of your time. Okay. If you're spending hours and hours putting together proposals, presentations, researching, things like that, you're probably wasting too much time doing it. Streamline your proposals, make them easier, more efficient, get them onto a template or a system that just makes it easier to turn them out. And more importantly, don't spend your time during the day that should be prime time doing things like that. I understand those things have to happen. They should happen. They're necessary for your business. I'm just saying they're not high value activities as it relates to sales. And the reason why you really need to manage that and manage it closely is because many times there are other things that are completely outside of our control that require us to prioritize them. If we have, let's say, a client who's upset, somebody who is upset with something, or needs a clarification, or needs some attention, a little TLC, right? Well, I understand completely that needs to be prioritized, and that can change your schedule. That can change a lot of schedules. It's required. I'm not talking about those situations. Those happen from time to time. I'm talking about the ones that you control. I'm talking about the time that you spend not dedicated to the things that really move your business forward. Okay. We have a lot of distractions in this world today. Heck, you could go do a little bit of research, find yourself on YouTube, checking out different videos, and all of a sudden one video leads to another. You're checking out this ad and something else pops up. It triggers something else in your mind. Next thing you know, you blew an hour watching a bunch of the different things, going down a different path, right? So it's important. It's really important to your success that you figure out how to maximize the use of your prospecting and selling, your high value activities during your prime time. Now, your prime time for your particular business may look a little different than somebody else's prime time. That's okay. But dedicate doing the right things at the right time in your business. And you'll find that not only will your numbers get better, your results will get better, your sales will increase. You'll find that your opportunity percentages rise. You'll find that your pipeline will grow. And the reason is you'll find that more and more of these things happen in bunches and you get into a rhythm. See, the other reason why this is important, and I don't want to dig too deep into the psychology of performance, but it's really, really important in the human mind that you're able to generate momentum through consistency and you actually build a rhythm in the things that you do. There's a reason why systems and processes are so important, because it works really well with the way our minds work. When you follow the same process or the same system, your mind starts thinking ahead. You start thinking like a chess player and you're 3 steps ahead of what's going to happen next. You start planning, preparing, you're building momentum. The same thing happens when you're prospecting. You get into a rhythm, you're engaging people, you're following up, you're chatting back and forth with people on social media. There's a rhythm, a momentum to it. What becomes really hard when you're in and out, hot and cold, jumping from one thing to the next, distracted by all these other things, it's hard to gain that rhythm. It's hard to gain that momentum. You find yourself in a position where just when you're starting to gain that rhythm, or just when you're starting to turn the corner and get that momentum going, right? Something distracts you and pulls you off track, pulls you into a low value activity, whatever that is. Now, I'm not in any way diminishing any of the priorities that come up in all of our lives, both personal and professional. They happen. All I'm saying is manage the ones that are controllable, because you can't manage some of the ones that aren't. You're dealing in some of those that aren't in a reactive position. There's not a lot you can do other than be as reactive as you can and deal with it when it comes up. But for the things that you can control, your own actions, your own activities, the way you schedule things, you need to master those. You need to have a control over those, because you'll find when you are able to do that and develop a rhythm that you will get more accomplished. Your performance will increase. Not only will your performance increase, but your confidence will. You'll find that you're dialed in, your messaging is on point, you're communicating crisply, you know exactly how to handle situations because that momentum, that rhythm is there. It's starting to build. Just like, sales creates excitement and motivation and builds more momentum and more energy, so does prospecting. And it's really difficult if you're prospecting and you're not getting anything going. It's not seeming to work. And then you get distracted, you get pulled by that. Well, what do you think your appeal is to go back to something like that if you haven't built any momentum or any rhythm? It's hard. Like, whether you knew it or not, your mind will send out little signals that will prompt you into doing something other than what it is that you were dealing, because it wasn't going well. There's like this negative feeling about it. Just like the inverse of that, if you're generating momentum, if you do have a true rhythm to it and it's starting to feel good and you're starting to see the reaction, the response, people are chatting up with you and you're feeling that you're getting closer to moving things forward. When you get distracted from that, your mind wants you to get back to that feeling. Whatever that short-term issue that came up, that little distraction that pulled you away, that will pale in comparison to that great feeling you had from that momentum and rhythm that you were generating in your prospecting and selling. But when you jump all over the place and you're back and forth in the middle of your prime time dealing with all these things, and when some of it, quite honestly, and you have to ask this of yourselves, when some of it, quite honestly, is within your control, you need to fix that. You need to fix that quickly, because I will tell you that that will impact your ultimate success. It will make it harder for you to build the sales momentum that you're looking for. Okay. There's 1,000,001 reasons for you to get distracted, right? A ton of them. Stay focused on the objective. Stay focused on what those high value activities are. Stay focused on your prime time and doing the right things at the right time with the right intention. When you are distracted, and you get pulled away from things, they have to be dealt with, but you are pulled away from your core high value activities. Work as efficiently and as quickly as you can to get back to your high value activities. Get back to doing those things that are going to get you what you're looking to get. It's so, so important in your success. And it doesn't matter what your industry is. It doesn't matter what your product or your service or your offering is. When you get distracted and pulled in an opposite direction, the best thing that you can do for yourself is throw yourself right back into the fray, start focusing on those high value activities and making something happen. Make something happen for yourself. Schedule another meeting, schedule an appointment, schedule a follow-up, get to that hard to reach client, start getting some excitement and momentum building, because that is what drives success. Getting to that place and feeling that rhythm and staying in tune with it. It's very common for everybody to get pulled and distracted by different things, but don't allow those distractions, whatever they are, to impede you from what you need to do as it relates to your high value activities. And if you're struggling with that, if you feel that that's a challenge that you need some work on, or you need some guidance on how to navigate through it, don't hesitate. Reach out to me. I'll be happy to talk you through it, walk you through it, pull you in off the ledge as it relates to that stuff. I'm happy to help in any way that I can with that. Just make sure that you don't find yourself in this back and forth scenario, because ultimately what it will lead to is a lack of production. It'll lead to a lack of sales momentum. You'll start getting down on yourself. Your confidence will wane. You'll feel that you're beat up. You're not getting anywhere. You're not building any progress. And that's not what we want anybody to feel. So keep those in mind. That's what I had for today as far as our thoughts. I wanted to make sure that I cover that. I think it's a really important step to stay focused on your high value activities and not getting distracted from all the low value activities. I'm not saying you don't do them. I'm saying pick the right time, right place, right situation to do them, and don't let them creep over into your prime time. So that was what I had prepared for you today. Let's open things up to some questions. I can open it up, questions on this topic or any topic. What do you guys have for me today?
Hey, Joe.
Hey, Chris, how are you?
I'm doing good. Hey, you were talking about ways to integrate, streamlining your, kind of your estimate and proposal process. Have
Mm-hmm.
you, do you know or have had any experience or know someone that has that they utilize that and integrate it into their CRM so that if you're doing follow-up text emails, you can grab the information from a mobile standpoint easily, have that
Yeah.
thrown into an estimate, and then save that estimate to a PDF so that you can send it as a DocuSign. I'm just out because they just triggered my, since we're putting together a CRM, I was like, oh wow,
Yeah,
streamline it, make it easy.
there are a lot of most modern CRMs will have the ability of either integrating something as a document and then
Hmm.
syncing it to whatever electronic signature program that you want to work.
Right.
Um, they either they have them built in, Chris, or
Okay.
there are integrations that will allow that to happen quite easily.
Okay. No, that's cool.
Um, you know, one of the things that I think is really important for everybody to have is, I think everybody, if they're not that person themselves, I think everybody needs a systems integrator or somebody, kind of like
You
somebody
need
who
the
understands
expert. Yeah.
applications like Zapier and all these other applications that integrate, because I think that's a really powerful part. But the short answer is yes, most modern CRMs will
Okay.
have something like that. Now, you know, the one little bit of advice that I will give you as it relates to all of those things is it
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily matter what it is. What you really should focus on most is it should be efficient for you to process, so it doesn't take a lot of time. And it should be straightforward and simple for the recipient to go through it. Like it should not be complicated. It should be easy.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Too many questions or pauses or things like that can cause confusion, which leads to inactivity, which leads to no choice from your prospect.
correct, correct. And the best analogy, Chris, it's kind of like prior to all this electronic uh signature technology, a lot of
Hmm.
times people were meeting face to face and they were getting pen on paper. Well, it's the
Yep.
equivalent of doing a great presentation, getting the person committing to wanting to sign, and then struggling to find the right contract. And then you find the right contract, but you're missing 2 pages, and you're juggling all this stuff right in front of the prospect, right? And that's exactly what you want to avoid electronically. If you're going to have the technology set up, it should be seamless. It should be nice and efficient. Something as simple as a page or 2, a signature or 2, and they can move forward. I just believe that approach will always get you a better outcome, and it'll minimize the likelihood of somebody getting cold feet or questioning their decision because, you know, there's that awkwardness between them saying yes and actually signing.
Yeah. And that's, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's part of one thing that we focus on, and something I've learned past from one of my other mentors was, you know, taking the prospect through a 4-step process. And it's super simple, because people like to know what's coming. Like, you know this already, so I'm going to tell you anything. People like to know what's coming. So when you sit down, hey, I want to get to know you. There's a simple 4-step process. You let them know, here's what we're going to go through. I'm going to learn as much about you. You know, I'm going to learn, a much, and I'm going to tell you about what we can do. I'm going to give you some options. Then you're going to make a decision. Yes, no, or maybe. Yes, no, or I never say yes, no, or maybe. I say yes, no, or try us for a quarter, and then we'll honestly evaluate. And if we're not a good fit, and we haven't done what I know we're going to be able to do to you and for you, then then we'll continue. But if not, if there's no risk for you that way, it's 3 months. That usually works good. But no, that's awesome. But with the sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and it's something that aligns well with what people are expecting nowadays. I mean, think about, 10, 15 years ago, you didn't really hear people that often talking about the concept of the client or customer journey, right?
Right.
They didn't talk about it.
Get them to sign.
Talk about it now. Now, it's it's right up there. People talk about it all the time. Like, what's the customer's journey? Like, how, from the point they first engage you to the point that they start working with you and beyond, what's that like?
What's your experience? Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And we're long past the point of sales professionals, no matter what their industry, not being responsible for those things, because ultimately they're responsible for all of it, especially when you're an entrepreneur or you're, a coach or a consultant working for yourself. It's all you, no matter what.
Yeah.
But you've got to keep that in mind. And, those efficiencies, play a big role. And that's a big, I'm happy you mentioned it, Chris, because that's a big area where people, they go down that rabbit hole, like hours and days, integrations and getting technology set up. And it all has to happen, but does it have to happen in prime time? And the answer is usually no. But great question. Okay. Who else has a question for us?
Great stuff, Joe, by the way.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm working with Dominic, who with the CRMs. And so it's great, because I figured he could, but I figured I'd ask you. So that's awesome. So I appreciate the feedback.
Well, no problem. Other questions? I do have one more topic that I can cover real quick that has come up a couple of times during conversations with a couple of people inside of our community and a couple of people from outside the community. One of the things that people love to talk about this time of year, because obviously the holidays coming up, the end of the year coming up, is how do we get people to kind of move forward? How do we get people kind of off the fence, so to speak? In fact, I haven't even shared the message yet, but I have a brand new podcast episode that just was released earlier today talking about that topic. And one of the things that's really, really important, especially this time of year when we talk about this stuff, is reminding and keeping it in the forefront of your mind to make whatever rationalization you make with the prospect about moving forward, making it all about what they get. And, whether that's cost savings or enhanced value or a greater impact because they get your product or your service or offering sooner. Make it all about what they get. Now, the power in that is at that point in the process, your prospects, as you guys all know, especially those that have been through ISM, you've talked about this, you know this concept. If they've been sharing with you impact focused responses about what things mean to them, why they're important to them, it's very easy to tie some of those things in to accelerate the timeline for decision. And I'll give you an example. So let's say a prospect is struggling to make a decision, and they want to wait until the first quarter because they're concerned about the timeline of what it will take to get everybody up to speed with a new product or service that you're going to be providing them. And I just thought it would make more sense to do it beginning of the year or first quarter after the holidays, so everybody would be focused on it, right? Well, a lot of times people will, and there's a couple of groups of people, there's some people that will just accept that and say, well, I understand that, that makes sense, and I'll reconnect with you in the first quarter. And there's nothing wrong with that per se, because that might be ultimately what the outcome is. But I do think that you have an obligation, if you're really going to be a trusted advisor for a prospect, to try to put your solution in their hands sooner rather than later. And the way you go about doing that, like, for example, if here we sit, today is the 15th of December, a couple of weeks away from the end of the year, people in the full-on holiday mode already. How do we get them to take action? Well, we go back to what they said was important to them and tap into some of that emotion, tap into what they were saying was important. Let's say that prospect said, look, it's really important to me that our people see us making an investment in them and making their life and productivity within our company easier. It's really important to us. We want to honor our commitments to our team members by giving them the best quality products. Great. Well, that's what their emotion is. It's something that's a big deal for them, right? Well, that's something you can easily tap into by saying something like, Mr. Prospect, I remember when we spoke about this topic, you had shared with me that it was really important to you and your company that you put these quality offerings in the hands of your team so they could feel your commitment to them to help them do a better job. Is that still the case? Well, yes, of course it's the case. Well, let me ask you this. I understand what you're saying about waiting until the first quarter, but for them to have the greatest possible success in 2023, for them to have the fastest start that they may have ever had within their business, in their roles and responsibilities for you, for them to be able to feel that, appreciation sooner rather than later, why don't we do this? Why don't we move forward with this now? Let's schedule a proactive review and training call with your team before the end of the year, so they know going in that you've got their back, that you've given them something that's going to enable them to have a full year of value and support through our offering. Would that be something that you could work with? And so you move them up and accelerate the timetable by reminding them of what was important to them, what emotional factor was weighing on them. If they push back on that, saying things like, well, I understand completely what you're saying, but for us to, let's say, get in and get you started and actually have it start to show your team the results that they will get from this ultimately, if we don't get started until the beginning of the first quarter, they may not see the results of it until the end of the first quarter, maybe even into the second. And as a result, they kind of would feel like they're only really getting 75% of what they could get for the year by having this. And I know when you said how important it was that they felt your support for their efforts by getting this type of a product or this type of an offering that would make their jobs easier, I'm assuming you meant 100%, not 75%. So why don't we move forward now and give them that whole year worth of value, get them up to speed, get them ready to roll so they hit the ground running hard and they feel that you gave them the greatest opportunity for success in 2023. And all we're doing there is going back and reminding them of what was important to them. Now, that's just one example on one particular topic, one particular issue. You can do that with any issue. Okay. You can use time to your advantage. If somebody says, well, we won't be ready till the first quarter, I understand completely. I want you to be ready in the first quarter. How about this? How about we get you started now, get you trained so you get the full effect in the first quarter? Now, obviously, these are not things that are guaranteed to work each and every time, but I will tell you, they do turn people around. In fact, I was on a call with a client just a couple of weeks ago where they had a client who told them, it's one of our coaching clients that we work with, and they told them, we're not going to be ready until the first quarter of next year. And they said, I understand completely, but could we at least jump on a call and just refresh everything so we know exactly where we stand? Because I believe that there's some additional value sets that we could provide you. They got on that call. They were reminded of why it was so important that their team got this relevant information as soon as possible. And believe it or not, they signed. They're ready to go, and that product is being delivered to them before the end of this year. So their team's going to have it full-fledged, ready to go for January 1st. And that, by the way, folks, was a $200,000 deal. Not a small deal, $200,000 deal, $200,000 in revenue. So this can work when you dig in and work towards looking at that client's best interest. Now, where that doesn't work, and I know you wouldn't do this, especially those of you that have been trained in ISM, where that doesn't work is when you make it all about you. You know, when it's about getting the deal done by the end of the year, or, you know, this one always gets me when a salesperson says, you know, I'd appreciate it, or you could help me out if you could do this by the end of the year. You know, that's the worst thing you can ever say to a prospect, right? Tell them and describe it to them why they benefit. It has nothing to do about you or what you get or what your company gets. Don't make it about you, make it about them. But it doesn't matter what example, whether you're using timing or whether you're using the delivery of the product, whether it's the utilization of the product needing time to ramp up, so sooner is always better than later, or whether it's pricing considerations, whether they get more money in their pocket by taking advantage of 2022's pricing versus 2023's pricing. Don't know which reasoning you use. I just know you need to make it all about them. And when you do it that way and you tap into what they shared during those impact focus questions, I promise you, you'll find some turning point that will get them focused on wanting to do this sooner. And even if they don't, even if they aren't ready, I will tell you, it's just tightening up the relationship for you for later. You know, you're just reminding them and reinforcing one of the emotional reasons. Number one, why they need to do it. And number two, why you're their trusted advisor, because you were the person that asked about this in the first place, talked about it with them, and even brought it up. You know, it's just a powerful, powerful statement. Now, after I've covered that, are there other questions? Is there something else that I could answer for you guys?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes, Susie.
So I have a prospect who we had the initial call. We had 2 calls, and then I didn't hear anything. So I was using the emotional statements on every follow-up, which was every 2 days after we spoke, and I didn't hear from him. Every 48 hours, I emailed him.
Yeah.
And I emailed him reminding him of what he had told me in the conversation with the emotional. So then he told me this morning, I'm not ready yet. I need to wait on this. I'm not ready to make a move. I have a list of, I don't want to call them generic, but they're sort of a list of like 5 benefits that I know every client of mine gets. It's not specific to clients, but I know every client will feel this value when they are done with me. It's proven. So I have this list of 5 things that they will enjoy. do I keep, he has told me he wants to wait. If I was to follow up with him again, do I remind him again of those 5 generic benefits?
Yeah.
In other words, do I keep sending it home? Do I keep at it? Do I keep putting those 5 generic benefits in the emails when I send them to him in the next month or so?
Well, I think you need to alternate the messaging. It's not always the same 5 generic benefits. You definitely want to mix it up. But I think you need to sprinkle in some other things that he needs to consider, something maybe along the lines of, there are 2 types of clients that I work with, and you certainly fall into one of those categories. The first is the people that are completely 100% just all in on making a change as soon as possible, because they come running and screaming towards me saying, I need your help. I need to get this done now. That's one category, right? And then the second category are people that want to make a change. They deep down know they need to make a change, but there's something that is holding them back, whether it's just timing or how they feel about it, whatever it may be. In fact, most of my best clients usually come from that second group, because they get an opportunity to talk with me a little bit longer. We get to know each other a little bit better. And the fact is, when they make that decision, we're all ready to go. So those are the 2 types of people that I work with. And what I've learned about both groups is this time of year, especially this time of year, it just triggers so much reflection that it always seems to me that early January, people really know what they want. And if I can help you whenever the time is right, I want to be that person for you. And you send something like that to them. And you mix it up. Now you sprinkle in the benefits, like obviously the benefits, but I think people like that need to be reminded that, they're not alone, right? Like, people love to think, oh, you don't have anybody like me, or you never dealt with a client like me, or I wish I had $1 for every time somebody's ever said that. But the fact is, there's a lot of similarities with people. And I think that particular type of a situation, Susie, you just need to remind them, like, I get it. A lot of people fall into that situation, but then you plant some seeds from things for him to think about, describing the 2 different categories, describing that the time of reflection this time of year, you're setting the table for him to make a decision. And then you send him the reminders. I wouldn't send them all 5. I'd send them, just some key things to consider. And work it that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. And just for your consideration, I will be sending the recording of this call out later today, so you can always catch it. Okay. What other questions do we have?
I'm good. Great stuff, man. Wow, as always.
Awesome. Well, I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah. It worked out. Had some things
if we
canceled.
don't have any other questions, I'm gonna wrap up. I do want to just share with you guys that we are not going to be having a VIP call next week. Next week will be the 22nd. So we're going to take next week, the next 2 weeks off, next week in the week between Christmas and New Year's. But if anybody needs me, you can reach out. I will be available. I'll be always near my phone. I'll be taking some time off around the holidays, but I'll be available if you have questions, need help with something, you want to run a sales scenario by me, don't hesitate to reach out.
Thanks, Joe.
Okay. Okay. Well, as always, appreciate all of you very much. Thank you for joining us today for the weekly Impact Sales Tribe VIP call, and look forward to talking to you guys soon. Have a great holiday. Take care.
Thanks, Joe. You too.
Thanks, Joe.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks. All right. Good stuff, man.
Yep. Hold on one second.